This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
This episode is brought to you by eBay. We all have that piece. The one that's so you've basically become known for it. And if you don't yet, fashionistas, you'll find it on eBay. That Miu Miu red leather bomber, the Custo Barcelona cowboy top, or that Patagonia fleece in the 2017 colorway. All these finds are all on eBay, along with millions of more main character pieces backed by authenticity guarantee. eBay is the place for pre-loved and vintage fashion. eBay, things people love.
Hi, I'm Dana Stevens, and this is the Slate Culture Gabfest Pee-wee's Big Documentary Edition. It's Wednesday, June 11th, 2025, and this week we'll be discussing, first off, the new documentary on Max about the life and the unique career of Paul Reubens, a.k.a. Pee-wee Herman. Next, we'll talk about Stick, a new comedy series on Apple TV Plus that stars Owen Wilson as a washed-up golf pro who finds a new lease on life when he meets a teenage boy who's a prodigy on the golf course. And finally, we'll talk with the writer Caity Weaver about her new story in The Atlantic that attempts to retrace the steps of Mark Twain in Paris in his book, Innocents Abroad. I'm joined today by Julia Turner, a fellow at the Annenberg School of Journalism in Los Angeles. Hey, Julia.
Hello, Dana.
Hey, great to have you on. And as always, by Stephen Metcalf, man about town, critic extraordinaire. Hey, Steve.
Hey, Dana.
Hey, great to be speaking with you both again. So let's make a show, shall we? And one note before we start recording, for some reason, my mic is behaving strangely today and only mine. So it may be that my audio track is a little bit lower quality than Julia's and Steve's in some moments, but I'll try to keep my insights on par.
They'll no doubt be much higher quality, and so it'll all even out.
The actor and comedian Paul Reubens died in the summer of 2023, almost 2 years ago now. Since Reubens had spent the previous 4 decades known almost exclusively by his comic persona, Pee-wee Herman, who he inhabited not only on stage and in movies and on his Saturday morning children's show, Pee-wee's Playhouse, but in talk show appearances and basically all public scenarios, there was a lot that even Pee-wee fans who grew up with Reubens didn't know about him at the time of his death. That included the fact that he had been ill with cancer for 6 years, unbeknownst to all but his closest friends, and also the fact that he was a gay man who from very early on in his career had made a decision to keep his sexual orientation a secret. Because Reubens led such an intensely private life, his involvement in 2 very public sex scandals, both of which, seen in retrospect, were essentially homophobic witch hunts trumped up by sensationalist media coverage, took a heavy toll, not just on his reputation, but on his mental well-being and sense of self. In the 2-part documentary Pee-wee as Himself, directed by Matt Wolf, the performer behind the man-child in the tight gray suit and the little red bow tie finally sits down in front of the camera and speaks as himself and for himself. Reubens sat for 40 hours of interviews with the director, often making his ambivalence about the project and his desire to take control of the camera himself painfully and awkwardly clear. He also presented the filmmaker with 50 years' worth of personal photographs, home movies, and other archival material from a very well-documented life. Let's start by listening to an audio clip from the documentary. Here you'll hear Reubens speaking as himself in his own voice about how he came up with the Pee-wee name and persona.
And I thought, Pee-wee Herman sounds so weird that it sounds real. It just didn't sound like a made-up name at all, like Cary Grant or like Rock Hudson or like a made-up name. It sounded, Pee-wee Herman, like if you were making up a name, wouldn't you make up a better name than that? Out of nowhere, the character popped out of me. When I say out of nowhere, it really wasn't in a big way out of nowhere. It was a whole bunch of things that had just kind of never really connect.
Okay, thanks. Okay, right now it's time to see what's in my bag of tricks, okay? All right, I'd like to start out tonight by doing a little bit of ventriloquism for you by bringing out my friend, Allie the alligator.
You know, what's striking about that clip, Julia, when you see him debut the Pee-wee character, which first appeared in some sketches with the LA troupe, the Groundlings, is how completely formed. The character already was. It wasn't sort of some proto Pee-wee. He's got the gray suit, he's got the red bow tie, he's got that obnoxious laugh and the voice. It's like Pee-wee fell completely into place from the first moment he assumed that character, and that really struck me. I want to start with you because you're the youngest of the three of us, so I wonder if you might be someone who was young enough to have experienced Pee-wee's Playhouse as an actual kid show while you were a kid, but I think maybe you had aged out of that demographic. Anyway, give me your own personal background with the Pee-wee Herman character.
I loved watching this documentary. It reveals so much, and then there's also an unrevealable core, or a core that Reubens is unwilling to reveal, which is really part of the subject of the documentary. But I was the right age. I saw the Pee-wee Herman movies in theaters as a kid. I was probably a little old for Pee-wee's Playhouse to be like to have captivated me and feel like my content exactly, but it was on and friends liked it and he was a character. And the thing that watching this reminded me of, it was like when I started rewatching the old Adam West Batmans with my sons when they were the right age. And when I watched those shows in reruns as a kid, I was like, "Yep, this is what grown-ups make, content like this." And it was only once I watched it as an adult where I was like, "Oh, this is all camp and it's supposed to be hilarious." Like the growing up in the '80s, you were just like, "Yep, Pee-wee Herman, that's what a kids show is." And you didn't really even understand. I mean, you knew he was weird and it was kind of kooky, but the ways in which it has its lineage in '80s comedy, '80s performance art, like the postmodern aesthetics of the '80s. I mean, it's such a specific creation of its time and a synthesis of so many things happening at the time that I was totally unable to see as a child, and then I didn't think about it for 40 years, and watching this doc, you get a sense of what, the sort of the brilliance that went into making that world, and then, the sadness at the heart of the man underneath it. I almost wish the show spent a little bit more time on why it was popular. I mean, the strongest case it makes is just what a charismatic performer Reubens is and how skilled he is at there's a great scene in the doc where he describes his ability to pull focus from anyone on stage, and they talk about his audition for the Groundlings and how instead of doing something big and attention grabbing, he would just sneak into other people's scenes and cock an eyebrow and completely ensorcel the audience. So that's as much of a theory as it advances, but you look back at it and you're like, why was this a hit movie? Why did America fall for this? Like it still strikes me as unlikely that it was such a big hit, and you kind of get to the heart of it here. But I also am curious what you guys thought if you were not if you had aged out of being the Pee-wee generation.
I mean, I think my appreciation of Pee-wee was much more cinematic than televisual. I loved Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I still think that's one of the great directorial debuts of the '80s. It was Tim Burton's first feature film, and his sensibility just marries so perfectly with Pee-wee Herman's, with Paul Reubens. Paul Reubens also was a huge force behind that movie. A big part of why it looks and sounds and feels the way it does is because of him, and he was one of the co-writers as well. But as he talks about in the documentary, he was not credited. He chose not to be credited and made this life-changing, career-changing decision that he would just be Pee-wee Herman full time, including in his public persona. And then later, to some degree, regretted and resented that because the success of the film was attributed completely to Tim Burton and not to him. Anyway, I mean, only part of my affection for Pee-wee's Big Adventure comes from the fact that it centers on my hometown, San Antonio, Texas, one of the few movies that is about a journey to San Antonio and to the Alamo. But it's a wonderful comedy and movie. As for his TV show, I was aware of it, but I was exactly the age, and I now regret that watching some clips from it in this doc, that kid content or anything that I perceived to be kid content was kind of anathema to me, right? Like somebody in my late teens and early 20s. So I think I sort of thought that it was too juvenile. But I do remember that my brother, who's actually older than me, but who loves comics and puppetry and the kind of aesthetic, the sort of punk aesthetic of the visual design of the show, was a fan of the show at the time. And yeah, Pee-wee Herman was just this figure who was there, whose choice to always be that character was part of his fascination and part of his mystery. What about you, Steve? What are your memories of him from that '80s time?
So I was very into it during the phenomenon. As to a theory as to why, I mean, who knows, right? There's always just that crazy X factor. It's so distinctively itself, and particular to the wild peculiarities or particularities of its creator. The why it would connect with an audience is maybe hard to say, but in terms of the period when it was most popular, I mean, it's the Reagan 80s. Things are kind of in this like there's a sort of super saturated, vividly colored in false nostalgia that defines the Reagan era as personified by Reagan himself. And what I think is very playful and in its own weird way profound about Pee-wee is that it throws all of that on the surface in the context of a purportedly child's show, but it indicates worlds and depths beyond that without being smirking about it, right? And even though there was sexual innuendo in the early phases of Pee-wee as a stage show, which is what it originated as, it was able to lose those without, not entirely ever, but substantially lose them without compromising that kind of interplay between surface and depth that was unfolding in a new way in the media and in politics. And it sort of echoed those energies in a highly arch postmodern way that really worked at the time. About the documentary, I'd say very quickly a couple things. One is that I wouldn't want any of its major, it's wonderful and people should see it, right? I wouldn't want any of its major elements to have been cut. They all are so meaningful. His playfulness with Matt Wolf, the director, on-camera playfulness, the mask wearing and the mask dropping, and the lack of clarity between which is which, right? Or when you're seeing Reubens and when you're seeing Reubens playing Reubens. And it's very sly, it's very fun, and it's hostile at moments, which is a very important part about the genesis of the documentary. His remarkable parents, the backstory of his remarkable parents, his father was a quintessential macho man. He was a stunt pilot for part of his career who was brought in to be a founding member of the Israeli Air Force because his daring do with planes was so fantastical. And what was remarkable about them wasn't that, it was that they were utterly tolerant of this slightly hard to categorize kid who was playful as a young child, super energetic, playful, and somewhat unusual as a young child, and then became a kind of a classic avant-garde misfit and college kid. And they just treated him with nothing but a long leash tolerance, love, and acceptance, including his homosexuality, right? Like it's like they never seemed to judge him negatively, even though he was utterly foreign to everything apparently about their worldview. That center at the heart of Paul Reubens, I think is once you hear about it is unmistakable, even in the Pee-wee caricature. The one thing, and then of course the horrible culmination of the whole story, which is this person who's found a way to live a kind of crazy dialectic by which everyone knows him, but no one knows him, right? Everyone knows Pee-wee. Pee-wee was universal in the 80s, but nobody knew Reubens, and that all collapses, right? And he set that up carefully. He wants fame, but he wants to remain unknown, personally unknown, and all that falls apart with the arrest. So I love the documentary. I think people should really see it. And if you balk at its 3-hour length, I don't think it should have been any shorter.
Oh, yeah, it's the perfect length, which is kind of rare for a two-part documentary. I feel like there's so many padded documentaries out there that could easily have been movie length, and this one needed just exactly every minute of its running time. I agree that it's a really triumphal piece of documentary filmmaking, and it does feel like a truly collaborative effort with Reubens, even though he's often resisting the interview questions from Matt Wolf. He just provided so much material, including just, Super 8 home movies that he had taken from those arty Cal Arts days, and you just can't believe how much documentation there is of his early life and early career.
It strikes me as somewhat tragic. I'm curious if you guys thought this. I mean, the film describes his two arrests, essentially endorses the idea that they were trumped up homophobic pursuits of him. But I think in a weird way, the film is slightly less persuasive on those points than it would be if Reubens had allowed himself to sit for the interview and be as honest about what was happening there as he was about his sexuality, which Wolf describes. It was hard to get him to be honest about that in that early relationship as well. But because he can't quite let down his guard to actually sit and talk to Wolf about it, you don't quite get the same portrait of that portion of his career, and he remains mysterious, which is, maybe the accurate portrait. Maybe he just wasn't comfortable stepping out from behind the persona. But it also makes me sad for the kind of tortured inability to clear the air.
And I think one remarkable aspect of that tragic sense that hangs over Paul Reubens' story is that he was almost born in the wrong time, or he was somehow his own internalized homophobia was not able to free him to the extent that he might have been able to do had he been of a slightly different generation, even though, as Steve says, his parents were really remarkably accepting for people of their generation. And a very, very sad aspect of his life story is that when he was at CalArts and, living this avant-garde theater life, he did come out to his parents, to the world. He lived openly with the man he was in love with. There's some really extraordinary footage of the two of them together. And then after that relationship broke up and he decided to try to make it in show business, he went back in the closet and very deliberately decided, in order to succeed in show business, I am going to mask my sexuality going forward.
My career would have absolutely suffered if I was openly gay. And so I went to great lengths for many, many years to keep it a secret.
So you were saying...
Look, I changed my mind about all this stuff. I really, I don't feel like I'm gay anymore, so...
Well,
I really don't, okay? I hope the HBO people see these rushes and realize that you're keeping me from food and sleep.
Okay, but you kind of thought...
That's why you can't depend on anything I'm saying. All this gay stuff, I was sleep deprived, I didn't have food. If I said I was gay, I knew I could leave earlier.
I mean, the fact that there is so much back and forth about, is he in the closet? Is he out of the closet? Is he gay? Is he straight? Also gives so much more power to the fact that the Pee-wee Herman character, and especially the Pee-wee Herman's Playhouse, the Pee-wee's Playhouse kids show, was just so subversively gay, in its self-presentation. I mean, as you say, Steve, it was completely appropriate for kids. It wasn't as if the show was, in any way sort of leering or prurient or anything like that. But the whole sensibility of it, the idea of Pee-wee as this sort of bachelor who entertained all kinds of people. He says at one point he made a point of wanting the Playhouse to be as diverse as possible without ever making a thing of it, right? So that all kinds of people came in and became regulars on the show. And there's a fantastic clip that I didn't watch the show enough to remember this ever happening, but this must be a famous Pee-wee's Playhouse moment when he is having a fruit salad picnic with all of his oddball friends in the Playhouse. And one of them says, well, if you love the fruit salad so much, why don't you marry it? He says, maybe I will. And then the next scene is of him having a wedding with a bowl of fruit salad, which is just absolutely most subversive and sort of delightfully queer way of presenting Pee-wee's oddball nature. It's called Pee-wee as Himself. It's a 2-parter, 3 hours total, and it's streaming right now on Max.
Today's episode is sponsored by NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast. Making financial decisions shouldn't feel like trying to pick a place to eat with friends. Too many choices. Everyone has an opinion on what's worth it. One person says, invest in crypto. Another says, go all in on real estate. Meanwhile, you're just trying to figure out if your credit card's annual fee will ever pay off. That's where the nerds come in. NerdWallet's finance journalists do the research so you don't have to, breaking down the fine print, cutting through misinformation, and giving you real, fact-based insights so you can make smart financial moves without the group chat chaos. NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast can help you get smarter about using home equity without over-leveraging yourself, and when refinancing actually saves you money and when it doesn't. Want to know if dividend stocks or growth stocks make more sense for you? Listen to the nerds. They also help decipher the real difference between ETFs and mutual funds without the jargon. Make your next financial move with confidence. Follow NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast on your favorite podcast app. And stay tuned until the end of the episode to hear the Smart Money trailer.
It's the time in the show when we discuss business. This week, we have 2 items. First of all, the list remains open for our Summer Strut edition of 2025. So if you haven't sent in a song and you want to submit a song or 3, I believe we said 3 songs should be the upper limit to keep the number of contributors, pretty much equal with the number of songs. Send it to culturefest@slate.com. And please put Strut 2025 in your subject line so we can quickly figure out what kind of an email it is. Our only other item of business is to tell you about this week's bonus episode for Slate Plus members. We're going to talk about a listener question. A listener wrote in to ask us if we could live somewhere, any city and state besides the place where we live, what would that place be? Of course, that's the kind of question that gets your mind fantasizing about all the places you visited in your life. Her one stipulation was it has to be somewhere you've never lived, even for a short time. So we have some answers to those questions that you'll hear in the Slate Plus episode if you're a member. If you're not a member, you can become one by going to slate.com/cultureplus to sign up. When you're a member, you'll hear bonus episodes like the one I just described. You'll also hear ad-free podcasts every week. And of course, you'll get unlimited access to all the writing and all the podcasting on Slate. These memberships are a big part of what keeps the show and the magazine going. So please, if you haven't already, sign up today at slate.com/culture plus. You can also subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify by clicking Try Free at the top of our show page. All right, back to the show. In the new Apple TV Plus series Stick, created by Jason Keller, Price Cahill, played by Owen Wilson, is a former professional golfer whose once brilliant career sputtered out years ago after a tragic personal loss. He's now divorced, depressed, and working a low-paid job selling golf equipment in Fort Wayne, Indiana. But when he witnesses a teenage boy named Santi, played by Peter Dager, sneaking onto the local course to hit balls with astonishing power and precision, the washed-up Price begins to recover his long-lost love for the game. He eventually convinces the boy's skeptical mother, played by Mariana Trevino, to let him take the kid on the road to play on the amateur tournament circuit in the hopes of qualifying him for the championship. Let's listen to a clip from the first episode. Here you'll hear the voices of Owen Wilson and Mark Maron, who plays Mitz, Price's longtime friend and former golf caddy. They've just pulled a small-time con in a bar where they've tricked a stranger into betting $1,000 on Price being able to hit a golf ball into a shot glass. The man has lost his bet, as was their plan from the beginning, and they're about to split up the money.
What's the matter with you? You could ease up a little on the whole Price Cahill broke down failure.
What are you talking about?
It's just, you don't have to be so, honest.
Look, man, I mean, those details matter, okay?
Yeah, they matter.
I gotta keep
if the details matter, then get them right. You said, broke down never was. That's not right. Broke down has been. I don't like it, but you could say that.
All right. Look, I'm just trying to keep the hustle fresh, I didn't want to do this tonight. You're the one who needed the cash again. I mean, there's a million things I could be doing right now.
Name 2 things. And don't say crossword puzzles or watching that idiotic show.
Hey, don't knock the housewives.
I will knock it, because it gets you negative.
Those ladies have a lot going on, Price.
And I can see that's where you get stuff like saying triple bogeyed your life.
I know, I was playing a character. We're doing the hustle. You were playing a character. You could have made the shot.
Playing it too good.
All right, Steve, I'm going to start with you in the hopes that maybe you have a relationship to the game of golf. I know you're a guy who follows some sports and who likes sports movies, and I'm not sure if golf has any meaning to you at all, but I'm just wondering whether the idea of a show set in the golf world, sort of you might say the Ted Lasso of golf, is something that appeals to you a priori.
No. I'm firmly of the A Good Walk Ruined, which was, I believe, George Bernard Shaw or
I think it was Mark Twain, actually, to shout out another segment on today's show.
Well, hats off to whomever said that golf is just a good walk ruined. It's also nature desecrated. I mean, it's just environmentally so grotesque. I went into the show maybe indifferent to golf at best, but a pretty huge stan of Owen Wilson all the way since Bottle Rocket. I had no idea what his name was when I saw that movie in the theater and thought this guy's going to be like our Jack Nicholson, right? I mean, it's like seeing Nicholson and for me, must have been like seeing Nicholson in Easy Rider in whatever year that was. And that prediction turned out to be, I mean, he's a huge star. He's been wonderful in so many movies, but something has happened along the way. And this was the first time I've seen Owen Wilson. I thought, just no. This isn't working somehow anymore. And I need to figure out why. Is it the material? Is it Wilson? What's going on here? I think, first of all, the material is terrible. I really believe it's like terrifically underwritten. And then they try to bake it back up from the underwriting to something substantive by creating one fake misunderstanding after another just to create conflict in the plot. So, for example, he's this washed up golfer, had a very famous, I guess, viral meltdown on the course. His career ended, very promising career as a pro ended. And now he's working at Too Big Country Club or golf club. Anyway, but he sees this kid who snuck onto the driving range and is just capable of superhuman feats. And he's watching him and he walks up on his initial approach and begins talking to him. And the kid, the way it's set up, right, the kid is sort of rightfully suspicious of this adult male out of nowhere, making what feels like a sort of come on. And they're just like any two normal human beings talking to one another in that situation. The adult would figure out that the kid is highly guarded, doesn't understand what the adult's motivations are, and in an adult way would explain them. And instead, this misunderstanding that it's some kind of a a sexual come on, gets maintained unusually long throughout the scene to zero comic effect because no one says what a normal human being would say in that situation. And then he continues to kind of semi-stalk the guy because he's just incapable. The screenwriters are incapable of giving Owen Wilson believable dialogue, which would just say to him exactly what his motivations are and what he wants out of the kid. It's just this odd combination of inert, frenetic, overwritten, and underplotted. And truthfully, Owen Wilson, God bless him, is 56 and he looks 38. To his credit, he does not look like a 56-year-old man pretending via makeup, CGI, and surgery to be a plausible 38-year-old. He can play a 38-year-old, but there's just something off about him still being this man-child, this sort of embodiment of a highly charming, admittedly like very charming, seductive immaturity. And the stage whisper begins to seem like an affectation. It just missed so badly for me, and I was rooting for it to work.
Whoa. I didn't like this very much either, but but I found more redeemable in it than you did, Steve, I think. Or at least, I guess I would say I still found Owen Wilson charming in it and felt like I wished they'd created a show that was more deserving of those charms. And I think some of the misunderstandings you've described are part of the issues I have with it. But my biggest one is just the kind of tonal mock of it. There's a moment, and I don't think this is too much of a spoiler, but he's divorced from Judy Greer, which seems like a terrible fate to anybody who had the good fortune to marry Judy Greer. So she's well cast as the like ex he's still pining for, who finally couldn't put up with his shit. There's a moment at the end of the first episode when he's connecting with the kid, and Judy Greer sees the kid, and the kid's so good, where Judy Greer says, he's not coming back, or, it won't bring him back. And that's already mawkish. And you're like, okay, this couple has lost someone. I'm thinking maybe a kid. And then you could just move on to the next episode, right? Like, okay, maybe that's part of the root of their divorce. Maybe that's the part of the root of his sports meltdown. No. What happens? Owen Wilson goes back to his garage, cues up a video from his 7th wedding anniversary years ago, watches, loving and grainy video footage of pregnant Judy Greer and a kid's birthday party. And like, there's just one gigantic bow tug on the mock note of the violin, MAWK. And you're like, what is this? I didn't need this. The line was enough. Like, it was already a lot to be like, oh gosh, there's a dead kid thing. You don't have to actually literally see the dead kid who's going to get dead. Like, I don't know. The sort of tonal instincts of it were not great. However, I will say that I kind of wish that they dropped the whole thing at once. Like, it doesn't have enough to sustain it to carry you through, but I feel like if it were bingeable, I might be along for the ride. Like I found the Owen Wilson stuff pretty charming. The golf montages, they spent a gajillion dollars on songs. Like, they are playing the A++ classic rock hits, and the sound effects. The real person to interview about the show is the Foley artist who does the golf sounds. Like, they make it sound like a rocket every time that kid hits a ball. And you're like, damn, that golf goes far.
You're cupping your wrist just a little bit.
There's a lot of golf montaging, which I guess as I'm describing it maybe doesn't sound great, but I could see myself as a sports movie sucker getting pulled in.
I probably liked it the most of the three of us. I completely agree that it doesn't work as a whole, but I think most of the problems that you're both alluding to could be solved. It's sort of like this meeting could have been an email, like this TV show could have been a movie. And if it had been a nice, economical, under 2-hour inspirational sports movie about Owen Wilson being a mentor to a golf kid, and Mark Maron, who I think is really excellent in this role. It actually made me kind of excited that Maron is putting an end to his podcast, as he recently announced, because he's a really good actor. He sort of always plays himself, but he's so comfortable on camera and so low-key funny that I always enjoy seeing him play himself. I think that vibe, like the vibe that you heard in that clip of the two of them splitting up the money from the con, could have carried this story if it was compressed. It's just so spun out. So, for example, as Steve was saying, the entire detour of him getting parking tickets and being taken to jail didn't need to be there at all. I completely agree that, there's way, way, way too much padding, way too much mawkishness around the kid, which would be more powerful if it was less harped upon. And there are major characters. I don't know how many episodes you guys saw. I think only 3 now have been, released on the channel, but we had some screeners for some others. And there are major characters, important characters, one played by Timothy Oliphant, a love interest for the Santi kid, who don't enter until, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 episodes into the show. So there's really something going on with the pacing that is way too slack. But I have to say that I got a little bit Stockholm syndromed into just enjoying the shagginess and kind of playing along. And I did get through about 6, 7 episodes of this 10-episode season.
I do wonder, though, just as a question to the panel, like the presumed charm, like it is a bit of an anachronism, right? The presumed charms of the man who cannot grow up. I find it just really hard to connect with that type in 2025. Anyone else have that issue, or is it just really on me?
It's interesting. I mean, we've talked about Ted Lasso on this pod, which is an obvious analog here, and a place where Ted Lasso went in its last couple seasons is a place where everybody's moral decisions are super whack. I felt a little bit of that here in the 3rd episode. Part of the tension comes from the fact that the Owen Wilson character lays a bet on the kid in the kid's first round, which is just totally inappropriate in his effort to win the trust. Like, he's supposed to just be invested in the kid's growth and not have a side bet going that causes him to treat the kid poorly or differently than, would make sense for encouraging his development and growth. And it's just kind of shrugged at. Like, it's, he gets a dressing down from the Mark Maron character. It's acknowledged within the plot of the show that that's a dumb thing to do, but the kind of weight, it's just weightless. The whole thing is weightless. And so I didn't have quite the same allergic reaction to the man-child thing. And I think men and women sometimes are fuck-ups and allowed to struggle through it. And you root for him. You root for Owen Wilson. And I found myself rooting for him here to get his shit together and get unstuck.
All right. Well, the show is called Stick. It's on Apple TV Plus, and you can watch it streaming there. Let us know what you think of it. Tell us we're all wrong if you want at culturefest@slate.com.
If there's one thing to learn from the entertainment industry, it's just how easy it is to earn a reputation, even if it doesn't reflect who celebrities really are. For example, everybody thinks that Discover is a card that isn't widely accepted, but in reality, it's accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Yeah. 99%. So maybe now you'll think twice before judging a book by its cover. Unless it's a celebrity cookbook, in that case, judge away. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report, learn more at discover.com/credit card.
This podcast is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game, shifting a little money here, a little there, just hoping it all works out? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can be a better budgeter and potentially lower your insurance bill, too. You tell Progressive what you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll help you find options within your budget. Try it today at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Send me $1,200 at once. I want to go abroad, Mark Twain wrote to his editors at the newspaper The Daily Alta, California in 1866. With a speed that travel writers in the 21st century can only goggle at, the paper acquiesced. And Twain, then a 32-year-old humorist more known for his work on the lecture circuit and his writing, took off on a cruise around the world on an American steamer named the Quaker City. The boat stopped off at many places, various cities in France and Italy, then later Athens, Constantinople, now Istanbul, Cairo, and elsewhere. His dispatches to the newspaper from the road were published in 1869 in book form as Innocents Abroad. The part of his trip that perhaps left the biggest impression on Twain, and on the many readers who bought the book that would become his biggest bestseller during his lifetime, was Paris. His account of himself and his traveling companions as penny-pinching bumpkins helped to invent the stereotype of the obnoxious American abroad. For her first assignment in her new position as staff writer at The Atlantic, Caity Weaver, who's previously written for The New York Times, GQ, and Gawker, made a similar request of her editors, adjusted for a century and a half of inflation. She wanted to take a trip to Paris that would follow in Twain's footsteps. The result is a delightfully subversive travelogue that, in a different way than Twain's, but very much in his spirit, showcases the traveler as much as it does the terrain. We are joined by Caity today to talk about her piece. It's called An Innocent Abroad in Mark Twain's Paris. It came out in The Atlantic last week. Caity, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
This is a really unusual and fun piece of travel writing. I am wondering, when you undertook it, was it Mark Twain that started the whole idea, or was it Paris? How did you come to the idea that you wanted to retrace his steps in Innocents Abroad?
So I got this assignment on kind of my first time in the office, and I was having lunch with Jeff Goldberg, who's the EIC, and Adrienne LaFrance. And they remembered, oh, we have this travel series coming up called The Writer's Way. So pick somewhere to go that was in a book and then go there and write about it. And I was going, oh, okay. And, right away, I couldn't think of any place that had ever been in any book. And I believe it was actually Jeff's idea. I think he said, go to Paris. And then I sort of had to figure out a book that took place in Paris, because I didn't want to disappoint my new boss on this first assignment he's kind of tossed out at me. But once I got the idea, wink, wink, to go to Paris, I think that Mark Twain's book popped into my head pretty fast, because I remembered reading it a few years back and really liking it. And luckily, since it's all in the public domain, you can find the entire text online for free in many different places. So I went back and just kind of quickly reread the beginning and the France section to see, was this book any good? Was this worth doing? And it's so infuriating how funny he is. That man was so good. So once I read it, I was like, okay, this is something that happened in Paris. I can go to Paris and try to, I guess, do some version of this. Even now, the assignment is kind of nebulous to me.
This is actually very different from Twain's trajectory. It's so funny. He started with, I want to go to Paris and around the world, and you have to send me. And you're sort of retconning in that desire in order to justify your piece.
Well, I like the idea that you're preparing to go to Paris on the Atlantic's dime, but you're like, it's a public domain book, so I could get it for free. I'm curious. I mean, it's interesting to think about Twain as a humor writer, and you have... you're one of my very favorite magazine writers to read, in part because you are so funny. There's a line in your piece about polar bears that I won't spoil that was the one that made me laugh out loud in my chair. But I'm curious how you think about humor writing in a magazine context. There's a lot of places to be funny and smart in the world besides magazines. And I'm curious how you think about, or why it is that you apply those skills in this form.
One of the things that I really appreciated when I went back and reread this is Mark Twain. I believe he took the trip in 1867, so a long time ago. But when you read it today, obviously a lot of it is very old-timey. Just the way he's getting around the world is very old-timey, and the kind of the problems he's running into and the way people are dressed. But his writing, I think, because it is so funny, still feels very fresh. It really doesn't seem like something that was written centuries ago. And so I don't know. I found it very intimidating. I found it inspiring, mostly intimidating, I would say, actually. I found it inspiring, but mostly intimidating. And I immediately regretted, I was like, why did I invite this comparison to Mark Twain for my first assignment? Why did I pick Paris, which everyone already knows about? Oh my God. I sort of was going off the first idea I had, and then immediately regretted it. I'm like, I should have picked something different.
Well, it's so kind of wonderfully ambiguous whether Paris sets the bar impossibly high or actually quite low in some weird sense. I mean, it's obviously an interesting, sensually pleasing, amazing to look at place. You're going to get great material. The French are endlessly amusing to Americans, especially. On the other hand, as you say, or as you indicate in the piece and in the segment already, is just it comes pre-imagined, right? Who hasn't read one of at least A Movable Feast or some apposite piece of writing about James Joyce or Fitzgerald or Gertrude Stein, or seen a biopic, and so the Paris pre-exists in our imagination are actually going to it as a romantic projection of everything maybe Americans aren't or can't be. And we think we'll be it when we go there. And what I love about your piece is that it's in the spirit of Twain, a kind of de-imagining of it so that you could experience it in a fresh way. So I'm curious to hear about that, like your relationship to Paris as a city apart from the Twain text, and then something maybe a little larger about just why Americans, like, we're kind of locked in a dialectic with the French, right? Like they have a vivid imagination of who and what we are as a society, and we have the same about them. And I would hazard the idea that that's unique. Like there's something uniquely intense about this mutual need to project and misprision with one another. So I think that's a question. Do what you can with it.
Wait, what was one of the last words you said?
Okay, I got a little fancy.
Yeah, what is it?
I said misprision,
I'm
and
writing it down.
it means to like misread or misunderstand something, but maybe in a pregnantly interesting way.
Ooh.
And now you know what persona I inhabit on this podcast. I'm the guy who says things like misprision.
I love it. I also, for the record, keep a list of words that I don't know and look them up. And I also try to work one into a lot of my stories because I love learning new words. And there is a word that made it into this story. I had to fight for it.
Wait. I know what it is, and I meant to look it up, and I didn't.
Wait, what was yours, Julia? What was your word?
Yeah,
Hold on, I gotta go find it. You answer the question, and I'll answer one of Steve's questions, and then I'll find the word.
I will. I certainly feel very American when I go to places that are not in the United States. I would, in the sense of being like an ugly American, I think I probably fit a lot of these stereotypes in that I love to chat with people. I love to kind of just go up and like joke around and be very casual. And that I don't believe that the French love that, although someone I was talking to was telling me that people in Paris are so much warmer and friendlier now than they were even like a decade ago. I was like, oh, Jesus Christ, what was it like a decade ago? So I kind of always feel a little bit like a misfit anywhere outside the US where things are not happening in the rhythm that I'm accustomed to, which is fine, because it's like even a bad time can be fun if you get a good story out of it. It actually was not my first time in Paris, although it was the first time I did things like go to the Louvre and go to Versailles, which are things that I had actually kind of wanted to do in the past, but it's sort of like going to the Statue of Liberty in New York.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to convince people to do it when you're there. So in some ways it felt like my first real trip to Paris. I had been there before, and I also took many, many, many years of French in school. Not that the French could tell once I started talking to them, but I did force myself to do it more on this trip than I would if I were there for pleasure, because I was trying to kind of capture the spirit of Twain, and it seemed like he was getting in there and chopping it up with them to the best of his ability. Actually, I had a really, really interesting conversation with a Twain scholar for this story, Matt Siebold at Elmira College. And I remember one of the questions I asked him was, how well did Mark Twain really speak French? Because he has a lot of jokes in his stories about the French not understanding his French. I believe it was Matt who pointed out to me that he certainly had taken steps to teach himself French, to learn French. It is possible that he had never heard it spoken by a French person until he went over there. So he might have been pronouncing things in a crazy way, but we probably had maybe the same kind of foundational understanding of it, and then trying to actually manifest it as audible human speech was perhaps where it fell apart for both of us.
All right, I remembered the word. It's the word knitted, N-I-T-I-D.
Yes, okay, that is the word. Yes.
Yeah, you use it in the sentence, the dining room's walls are a knitted beeswax yellow. I believe this is at the bistro you're at the first night.
Yes.
What does that word mean? And is that the word you fought for? And how did you come to discover it and use it?
That is the word I fought for. I've been saying it in my head, knighted, but I actually don't know if that is correct. This is something that my husband always, my husband mispronounces a lot of words. And it sort of, I hate to mispronounce a word, or I used to hate it, but he said to me once, and this has really stuck with me, that it's actually good when you do that, because number one, it shows that you learned it from reading, as you said, but it also shows that you're brave enough to use it. It's like, I found this word, this is going to be my word, and I'm going to throw it out there.
Exactly.
But it still makes me a little bit crazy to know that I mispronounce things. Okay, and the definition that I found was bright, lustrous, shining. So yes, I was just trying to say, these walls were this kind of really pretty, like sort of ochre colored, golden yellow, and I don't even remember how I came across this word. I was trying to find some word that would kind of, because if you say a wall's yellow, I think it can sound sort of harsh or ugly, and this was a really sort of warm, almost jewel-like shade of yellow. So somehow I came across this word. I thought, I guess that'll work.
It's so fun to me to have this experience reading your article, because truly, I don't come across words I don't know that often, especially in like published text. And I think, we get criticism sometimes and fondness in our emails of like, why are you, there's a objection to using $10 words or obscure words when you could use plain ones. And of course, part of Twain's mischievous glory is that he pretends to be a plain-spoken, folksy cornpone guy, and then he's dropping jejune and solecisms all over the place. So anyway, it feels very in his spirit that you would sneak this random ass word in here.
I'm honored to hear that. And I also think if you find a word and it really, words exist because they have specific meanings. So if you find an unusual word that really does have the right meaning, of course you should try to use it. How exciting. I'm very impressed that you right away were able to identify the word. That's great.
According to the internet, British English says knighted and US English is knitted.
Okay. I don't think a lot of US English speakers are using this word, so maybe we can revise
It's Brits only. Okay.
So there's so much more to say about this piece. I hope that our conversation will send readers to it, because there's really specific kind of, notes about, for example, going to Versailles, and, some very funny stuff about food in Paris, which you found almost inevitably disappointing, with the exception of some incredible butter, which also sounds like it had a knitted glow. But I wanted to ask, when you set out to write this, what were you expecting, and what came about that was different? In other words, what did you learn on your summer vacation in Paris, Caity?
This is deeply embarrassing. I was truly mortified to be inserting this into the piece, but they wanted, kind of the idea of the piece was to be able to recommend a few things about Paris. And you know what? I really loved that Mona Lisa. I love the Mona Lisa room. Not even so much the painting itself, but I had such a blast going to the Louvre and standing in that room and seeing everyone see the Mona Lisa. And I was really embarrassed to come back and tell my job, like, okay, so you guys just spent all this money to send me to Paris to uncover some cool things. Number one on the list, Mona Lisa. Don't miss it. I was surprised by how much I enjoyed it.
Well, but it's your perspective on it. Your self-deprecation is bending over a little too far backwards, because what you do is turn around and observe the room and the bizarre customs of the humanity therein, and it's a pretty great portion of the piece.
Yeah, painting itself, fine, perfectly nice, but that setup, I'm kind of complimenting, I guess, the architects of the Louvre at this point. They got it in there nicely.
So you have a wonderfully surprising and non-obvious take on it. And then also later in the piece, again, with that professor from Elmira, you seem to perhaps uncover that Mark Twain faked going to the Louvre and never actually went in, or at least wasn't describing very much specific about the interior. So there's many, many other delights for people to discover in this piece.
I don't mean to be slandering Mr. Twain, who was also an Atlantic writer, so he's my coworker. And I'm kind of throwing him under the bus a little bit. But I really think that man might have lied about going to the Louvre. I have a sense. I actually did a lot more research into this than is even evident in the story, because, I was figuring out like the day of the week that he was there. I was reading guidebooks from 19th century Paris to see what days the Louvre was open, and the hours, and just sort of then I made like a little schedule. It was almost Carrie and Homeland level stuff. Like I made a little schedule showing, okay, well, if he went to Versailles on this day and he arrived on this day and he said that he didn't go to Louvre on this day, like when could he possibly have gone? I just really don't think that he had time to do it. I think he didn't prioritize it. But he says that he went there, and one of the kind of big tip-offs for me was that he describes. There's a very funny scene when he is describing trying to get to the Louvre, and he's, a kind of French guide that he's hired is taking him all over the city in this carriage instead of to the Louvre, which is where he wants to go. But I tried to stay in the same hotel that Twain stayed in. So I knew that this hotel is right across the street from the Louvre. You don't need to be taking a carriage there. And then once I kind of got stuck on that, I was like, and actually, once he gets in there, he doesn't really describe anything specific at all. He spends a lot more time talking about very inconsequential things, which, hey, I'm sympathetic to that. I know that game. I know what that's like. And just sort of the more I thought about it and turned it over in my mind, the more I convinced myself this is a total conspiracy theory. And I want to be clear, it might be entirely wrong, might be straight up wrong. But I really think that man didn't go to the Louvre. And you know what? I kind of don't blame him. He had limited time there. I didn't do as much as he did, but we were both there for just a few days. And I felt frantic doing the few things that I did. So should he have lied about it? Probably not. And did he lie about it? Maybe not.
We'll have to send readers to your piece to get the reveal, but I love that when you float this theory to your Twain expert, he comes right back to you with a letter that seems to corroborate your idea in a very amusing fashion.
That felt incredible. That was the best feeling, getting that man's email. Oh my God.
Well, listeners can find out more about what you learned and what you were surprised by in Paris in this piece in The Atlantic. It's called An Innocent Abroad in Mark Twain's Paris. Caity Weaver, thanks so much for coming to discuss it with us.
Thank you for having me.
My day kicks off with a refreshing Celsius energy drink, then straight to the gym. Pre-K pickup, back home to meal prep. Time for my fire station shift. One more Celsius, gotta keep the lights on. When the 3-alarm hits, I'm ready. Celsius. Live, fit, go. Grab a cold, refreshing Celsius at your local retailer or locate now at Celsius.com.
After Zoomies at the dog park, it's time for Drive Up at Target. In goes a big bag of kibble and one squeaky chicken toy for the good boy. Drive Up that's ready when you are, only in the Target app. Just tap Target.
We have reached the moment in the show where we endorse our favorite cultural experience we had the previous week. Steve, I'll start with you. What was yours?
I am going to endorse the Questlove documentary about Sly Stone, Sly Lives, ! That's on Hulu, for the obvious reason that Sly Stone has died. In the cycle of our making the show, it happened at exactly literally precisely the wrong time for us to be able to incorporate a full proper segment due to someone who's as much of a giant as Sly Stone is. But this documentary, I'm sending you with just full-hearted, full-throated enthusiasm to this documentary, which I finally watched last night when the news of his dying hit the wires. So Sly Stone was, and Sly and the Family Stone, obviously, were just massive path breakers in American music. The documentary does a beautiful job of explaining exactly how and why. The archival footage is absolutely stunning. The music just has lost nothing. It's done nothing but gain in the time since it was made. I mean, where do you even begin? It just, all of what were thought to be, opposed opposites, starkly opposed opposites in American music between white and black, between rock and various forms of black music, R&B and funk. I mean, and then the legacy, right, which is it goes right into Parliament and Funkadelic. It goes directly into Prince and all the hip hop sampling and and just so many tracks of pop music and hip hop come either influenced by or come directly out of the Sly discography. So getting some sense of the range of his genius and the fact that it's Questlove making the documentary, and himself a musician, obviously, himself a Black American, and it really explores the notion of Black genius and white audiences with enormous sensitivity. But especially now, right? Especially now when America is once again going to confront how violently internally opposed it is. Factions of America are violently internally opposed. The fact that there's the possibility of creating something totally original to the United States and uniquely beautiful and harmonious out of it is really an extraordinary thing. So please, Sly Lives! ! By the extraordinary Questlove about the even more extraordinary Sly Stone.
Julia, what about you?
All right. We talked about season 1 of Poker Face on this show. This is the Rian Johnson show for Peacock, starring Natasha Lyonne as a kind of fuck up truth-telling savant or truth-discerning savant gumshoe. And I just housed the available episodes of season 2 while recovering from COVID this weekend. And granted, I was in a COVID fever dream, but it's crazy how good and fun this show is. And it's like a weird artifact of our current moment in TV that there isn't a ton of fanfare because it's on Peacock and because it's sort of detective-y, and maybe we somehow take Natasha Lyonne for granted post-Russian Doll or something. But among the things that recommend it are the structure, right? She goes to a different place and solves a different mystery every time, and so there's always new cast. The people of Hollywood are hip to the fact that showing up for a week or however long it is to make an episode of this show is fun. The guest stars in this season are literally every actor that you've ever had the feeling when they show up on screen, like, amazing, they're here too. Like, that is the protocol for casting. The people who you see are, in the first episode, Cynthia Erivo. Then in the next episode, we have a star turn from Katie Holmes, who is luminous and so compelling. And you're like, oh yeah, Katie Holmes. Forgot about her. She's great. Who's she playing opposite? Giancarlo Esposito, Gustavo Fring himself. Later on, there's a terrific episode about a maniacal kid played by a kid actor. But who are the teachers at this school? Oh, David Krumholtz and Margot Martindale, of course. Like, just Margot Martindale showing up for kicks in a Peacock episode. And Natasha Lyonne is great, and the writing is great. And Rian Johnson, newsflash, good director, like good creator of stuff. I mean, it feels like in a different media moment, more people would be talking more about this show. So if it's sort of been tucked away on a shelf of like, oh yeah, Poker Face, I'll get to that, I would recommend you get to it. There's a few more episodes still to drop this season. They're dropping weekly, but it's just remains as sharp and entertaining as it has ever been, and the performances in it are great.
You're reminding me that I hung on to Peacock mainly to watch that second season when it dropped, and I haven't started it yet, so I will. You know, Rian Johnson must be very fun to work for, because it's true that in his movies and now on TV, he gets anybody he wants and is able to cast them. All right. Well, this actually connects, Julia, to your cast of thousands endorsement. So listeners may know that I have a particular fondness for websites that do one thing, like really simple websites that feel like they're from the late 90s, where there's just a simple action that you can perform on them over and over again, but it's very satisfying. The kind of ultimate example of this is the Inception button that came out after the Chris Nolan movie Inception, where it was just a big red button, and when you pushed it, you'd hear that rah, like the Hans Zimmer blam from the soundtrack. The Brahm button. I believe the Inception button is still up. Somebody is maintaining it. But I came across another one. I believe this was through the TCM Blue Sky feed, the Turner Classic Movies feed, linked to the Oracle of Bacon, which is a very old website. I think it's existed since 1999, possibly has been revamped some in that time, but it does look very old school. And all the Oracle of Bacon does is allow you to enter an actor's name and see how many degrees of separation from Kevin Bacon they are. But it's a brilliantly designed site. Like, I'm looking right now at the stats on this site's stat page, and the number of actors they have linked in their database is 1,556,425. So I challenge you to come up with an actor's name that will not be matchable with Kevin Bacon. And it's very hypnotic to sit there and enter actor after actor. If it's a contemporary actor, almost inevitably, there are 1 or 2 degrees of separation from him. It's extraordinary how hard it is to go higher than that. And so I started putting in, you know, like Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin, like people from the silent era. They would still be 2 degrees of separation only from Kevin Bacon, because there would have been some actor they appeared with late in their career who had also done a movie with Kevin Bacon. So it's a very sweet website. I love that it doesn't have any bells and whistles except for just enter a name and get a number. And I guarantee that you will enjoy trying to stump the Oracle of Bacon website by finding somebody who has 3 or more degrees of separation. All right, that does it for this week's show. You'll find links to some of the things we talked about today on our show page, slate.com/culturefest. You can also drop us an email at culturefest@slate.com. Our producer is Benjamin Frisch. Our production assistant this week was Annalie Ndunye, and the composer of our theme music is Nicholas Bertel. The executive producer of Slate Podcasts is Mia Lobel. For Julia Turner and Stephen Metcalf, I'm Dana Stevens saying thank you all so much for being listeners. We'll talk to you again next week.
Today's episode is sponsored by NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast. Money can be confusing. Should you invest in ETFs, get a travel rewards credit card, buy a house, or just build a really fancy pillow fort?
That could work. No shame in pillow fort game. Or you could just tune in for clear, research-backed financial insights.
I'm Sean Piles, a certified financial planner professional.
And I'm Elizabeth Ayola. We're the hosts of NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast, where you bring the money questions and we bring trustworthy information backed by NerdWallet's expert analysis, without the jargon or the sales pitch.
Our nerds do the research so you don't have to. We'll help you understand your options so you can make the best decision for your situation, from optimizing your investments and maximizing credit card rewards to making big money moves with confidence.
Plus, we keep it real. No lectures, no judgment. Just tips and tools you can use to build wealth and take control of your finances. Think of us as your financial GPS, helping you navigate your money decisions and avoid expensive wrong turns.
Whether you're planning for retirement, weighing a big purchase, or just want to make your money work harder for you, we've got insights that you can use in real life.
So, if you want practical, straightforward, and actually useful financial knowledge, plus a little bit of fun along the way, follow NerdWallet's Smart Money Podcast on your favorite podcast app.
Trust us, future you will thank you.
If you're a lineman in charge of keeping the lights on, Grainger understands that you go to great lengths, and sometimes heights, to ensure the power is always flowing. Which is why you can count on Grainger for professional-grade products and next-day delivery, so you have everything you need to get the job done. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.